It's time for Quick on the Uptake here on AM 950 KTNF. Here's your host, Mike McEntee.
Thank you, Marty. Hey, we got some interesting things for you today. Of course, that's why you tune in, right? Or that, or you just left your dial on when you're driving home. But either way, we're glad that you're with us today. We have an interesting program. We're going to be talking about, guess what? The Coleman-Franken trial. But this time we got a little bit different perspective. This time we are talking with somebody who's been watching it courtesy of the UpTake, not one of the people who, is part of the UpTake, crew, so to speak, but somebody who's been blogging this every day on Daily Kos, or Daily Kos, depending on how you pronounce it. And we're going to get a kind of perspective on what he is seeing and also what people from around the country are seeing, because every day he posts up his blog post, hundreds of people comment on it. So, and I'm not sure if he reads all of them, but I'm sure he reads some of them. So we'll find out what that is all about. Also, we will be talking about the media, and that is another popular topic that we have here. There's a certain columnist in town that you may or may not have heard, probably have not heard, that he's no longer a columnist. And the question is, why haven't you heard about it? That's a very interesting question, and that columnist is Nick Coleman at the Star Tribune. We will talk about what's happened and why that is and how that reflects on what's going on in the media today. And we'll be speaking with David Brower of MinnPost about that. That's all coming up on the show. But first here, let's get to the man who goes by the handle of WineRev. He is on the line. Hello.
Hello, Mike. How are you tonight?
Hey, I'm pretty good. Do you care to tell the world what your name is?
Well, let's just stick with WineRev. Or
Okay.
You can call me Carl by my first name.
There we go. That's fine. Carl, what got you interested in this whole trial?
Well, I mostly just wanted to put something up for the readers of Daily Kos, kind of the local information that if you're in, Pismo Beach, California, you'd never read.
Well, there's some of those things that we never read here in the Twin Cities even. So,
well, it's the stuff I make up.
Okay. Well, I mean, what I'm saying is that you have been doing very detailed coverage of this trial on your daily posts on Daily Kos.
Thank you. It's I basically started just sort of a kind of a clipping service from the Star Tribune, the Pioneer Press, and it's just grown from there. Minnesota Post and the Independent, the Progressive Project, you folks, of course, at the UpTake, and then the Internet is wonderful. So you can go and look at what the newspapers are seeing in Duluth or St. Cloud or Thief River Falls.
Yeah, a lot of people look. Do you have any idea how many people look at that diary every day?
There is a place where you can go and check the stats. I haven't, how many views it gets. Sometimes when it's rolling, it'll be 800 views or something, but I don't check that regularly.
But you probably do read the comments that are on the thing. You get hundreds of comments, it looks like, every day on it.
Well, at least dozens. But yeah, I do try to read through all of them, and when I get a chance, to respond to some of them and laugh out loud on some of them too.
This trial obviously is attracting more attention. Well, it's attracting attention outside of just Minnesota. What are people saying and thinking? Why are they paying attention?
Well, of course, the Daily Kos audience, has a progressive lean, I think, in general, to the audience.
Yep.
And everybody understands the importance of getting another progressive voice in the United States Senate. And Al Franken would certainly do that. And so if the Democratic Party there can get one more vote and they have one less reason to lean on people like Arlen Specter or Olympia Snowe.
What are people saying when they're looking at this from the outside, looking at Minnesota? Are they laughing at us? Are they concerned? What are these comments all about?
Well, I think earlier on when we did the actual recount. There was a tremendous, wonder of, gee, this is how a recount ought to be done, by openly, transparently, by adults who know what they're doing,
As opposed to something we saw a couple of years ago in Florida.
Yeah, or Ohio,
Ohio,
or other many places like that.
Yeah, the whole litany. Everybody knows that list. Okay.
Yeah. And then even when we got down to the challenged ballot phase, and the uptake was broadcasting. My goodness, 20,000 viewers as the canvassing board was taking up a ballot and saying, well, what about this one? People were finding themselves oddly riveted by this. Again, here's democracy in action.
Democracy being a participation sport as opposed to just an observation sport.
Yes, yeah, very much. Now, as this moved into the trial phase, there's been, I think, a bit of a sag in the sense of, my God, is this ever going to end? And it has become something of a trial with lawyers and that sort of thing. It's moved from being a drama of democracy to being, at least since the Coleman case has been put on, kind of a bad rerun of a canceled law program.
Yeah, okay, we're waiting for Aaron. Who was that? Ironsides with the wheelchair to come in.
Oh yeah, I don't, and that was just the detective side of it.
Yeah.
But this has been a remarkable exercise in tedium so far, for the most part. We all look forward, I think, to the objections and the cross-examinations from the Franken side, because here we go again. Here are some adults that seem to know what they're doing.
Now, Carl, do you have a legal background, a journalism background, or are you just a citizen who's been interested?
Neither one on the legal or journalism side. Just doing citizen stuff, and some religious work in my time.
Okay. So when you look at this trial, what are you seeing? Everybody asks, what's the end game? What's going to happen here at the end? And since you've been watching pretty carefully, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think, first off, the Coleman universe will continue shrinking.
And universe, for people, that's the number of ballots that he might have counted here in this contest. Yeah,
and that's a kind of a potential number. I think, and this is just when Mr. Coleman has his side of the case being presented, and I think the prospects are getting thinner and thinner there for him. I think the election contest court is going to finally reach a decision and declare who had the most votes, and I think that's going to be Al Franken. And I think that's going to be a unanimous decision, which will be instantly appealed to the Minnesota Supreme Court.
Now, do you think we're going to actually open up any of these ballots that have been presented here?
I think the most likely, that I personally would like to see open would be the roughly 400 ballots that were improperly rejected by local officials, and they admitted, we goofed here. We'd like to kind of go back and do this right, and because of various objections from both the Franken and the Coleman camps, there's about 400 of those ballots that have not been counted, and I think they should be.
And these are ballots that, as you said, the Coleman campaign and the Franken campaign had a chance to accept when the original recount was done. But both campaigns, or one or the other, decided that that vote would not be counted. Now the Coleman campaign has come back, I think, with most of these and say, well, we changed our mind. We think it'd be a good idea to count these. Does that strike you as weird?
Yeah, and also another whiff of desperation.
Okay.
They are behind. They need every vote they can scare up,
Yeah, and we know already that there's about 24, 25 ballots that are going to be opened and counted. It's a question of when. These were the ballots, more than likely for Al Franken, by a group of people who filed a separate suit that was kind of folded into this. And a summary judgment has agreed that all these ballots are going to be put in. So your unofficial count puts Al Franken up by how much now?
Well, the state canvassing board had him at plus 225.
Right.
And I've been counting in those 24 ballots that you were mentioning as well. So I'm keeping them at 249 the last week on my blog.
Okay. And are you a stats guy, or are you mostly an observer? Because when we start talking stats, we can start talking about, the probabilities and, all these percentages. Do you get into that stuff, or are you just pretty much paying attention to what's in the courtroom here?
Yeah, I am not the stats guy at all. I was an economics major. We were required to take one course of statistics. I always, like many of my friends, called it sadistics.
Sadistics.
And that's my opinion to this day.
Okay, well, I took an economics course, and I called that was sadistic, I think, to begin with. But and I also took 4 quarters of calculus because I thought it was fun, and I still didn't understand economics. I think to this day, I think we've demonstrated that most people do not understand economics, even the people who make the economic decisions.
Oh yeah, some of these Wall Street people are far from being the smartest guys in the room, unless it's the Enron sense.
No, yeah, that's exactly it. That was an interesting. If you have not, by the way, folks, if you have not ever seen that documentary, please do. It is a very interesting take on how things can go wrong.
And infuriating, too.
Carl, better known as WineRev to everybody on the UpTake blog and, of course, on Daily Kos, posts daily at Daily Kos, and is also a participant in the blog at theuptake.org. I assume you're going to stick with this until its trial is done.
Yes, yeah, I'd love to. And I just, after last night's meet and greet and drink liberally, I just want to make sure that was only the warm-up for the swearing-in party.
Okay, I assume the Al Franken swearing-in party is what you're talking about.
Well, yeah, and if I think some of the stuff that's coming off of the Coleman team keeps going, well, maybe we should have a swearing-at party too.
Okay. We'll take that suggestion up and see what happens. Carl, thanks for joining us as a guest today, and as a lovely parting gift, you have my thank you. That's about all I can offer you. But
okay.
I appreciate
Mike, and for all you and the UpTake crew are doing. You're part of what's making democracy happen before our very eyes, and my hat is doffed to all of you.
We love to keep government transparent. Carl, thank you again, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes. We'll be talking about a couple different topics, including I want to get back to some of that stuff that happened yesterday with Plenty's budget. We'll get into that. You're listening to Quick on the UpTake. I'm Mike McEntee on the Voice of Minnesota. I was listening in on Noah, by the way. He's live right now while I'm doing this program, which is why you're seeing this program not live. It looks live, but it's on tape. But it's going out on the radio live. Can you follow that? Good.
Visit glassinstallersplus.com or call 763
18 degrees and 22 minutes after 5 o'clock. Thanks for joining us here on Quick on the UpTake on your drive home. We are glad to have you along. My name is Mike McEntee. We have been talking about the Coleman-Franken trial, and I'm sure we'll come back to that as a topic, maybe even in this show. But I wanted to move on to some of the stuff here that's happening locally, actual issues, things that affect our lives. And one of the things that's going to affect our lives very much so is what Governor Pawlenty has proposed to do with our budget. And our budget, I say, not the state's government's budget, but that's our budget. We all have a stake in this. And the governor's budget calls for pretty deep cuts in local government aid, an area that affects all of us. And you ask what local government aid is. Local government aid are the dollars that help pay for your police, for your fire, for your library, for fixing your roads. Yeah, you're either going to see a tax increase on your property tax, meaning you're going to be paying through that, or you're going to see less protection for police, fire, and your roads won't get fixed. And the governor will say, well, hey, the city's decided to do that. It's pushed the problems to somebody else. Another place where he has decided he's going to push the problems to somebody else is health care. Yesterday, we had a pretty interesting hearing, and we only got to touch on a few bits of it during the show yesterday, but we had an interesting hearing from in the Health and Human Services budget, Health and Human Services Committee, about the budget. And this was all about how the budget cuts are going to affect Minnesotans. And during this show here, if you have some thoughts on this, go ahead and weigh in, 952-946-6205. But here is Patricia Lind, who is a mother of an adult child now. And this child has obviously some medical problems, and she's talking about what the budget cuts are going to mean to her. And as you might guess, it's not going to be good.
We're the parents of a 34-year-old daughter who is one of the proposed 85,000 people that the governor would like to cut as single adults from MinCare. We did send a letter to the governor, to Senator Berglund, and to Representative Huntley. We can only advocate for our daughter. I am glad that so many other people are advocating as well. It seems that there's a misunderstanding by the governor as to why people are in MinCare. It is simply because they have illnesses, take prescriptions, or have pre-existing conditions that private insurers will not allow them to be insured. Many of these people do work, some are unable, but many would work if the private insurance world would insure them, which it will not. Our 34-year-old daughter has had a history of difficulty with thyroid disease, specifically Graves' disease, that then triggered bipolar illness since she was 18. In the period of time of following faithfully the treatment regimen that she's been given by wonderful endocrinologists and psychiatrists, everything doesn't always go the way it's supposed to. And she's had situations where she had a thyroid was surgically removed and then somehow magically regrew and had to be removed by radioactive iodine. These stresses on the body exacerbate the bipolar illness and have created many situations in which she could not be employed, though she has worked very hard to continue to do that. When she was no longer able to be covered by our private insurance, we went about the business of finding somebody who could insure her. As a student at Augsburg, they told her, sure, 9 years ago she could be insured for $700 a month. So that is why we went to MinCare, and she have been incredibly grateful. It has actually saved her life in a couple of instances, and again, she's only one of 85,000 people who would be cut.
That's right, 85,000 people, according to Governor Pawlenty's budget, would no longer have health care insurance through MinCare. And as you heard, it is a bargain. It is an absolute bargain, but it is given to people who are in desperate need, as opposed to you and I, who might have insurance through a spouse or a significant other, or through our work employment. I'm going to play you one more here, and then we'll get to some phone calls. Heidi Gabbert, and if that last name sounds familiar, that's as in Gabbert's, as in the furniture store, is somebody who's suffering from a lot of illnesses and mental illnesses. And her point is here that it doesn't matter, how fortunate you may be financially or famous, that mental illness can strike you.
Hi, my name's Heidi Gabbert. I am related to the Gabbert family. My grandfather was the founder of Gabbert's Furniture Store in Edina and also the Galleria. I'm here to tell you that mental illness has no discrimination from prominent to poor. I've been going to professional rehabilitation centers for 2 years. I've stayed out of the hospital for 2 years. I've been sober for over 2 years. I'm now living in an apartment. I lived in a group home. I'm learning new coping skills to manage my voices, depression, anxiety, working to learn how not to headbang. I'm able to drive a car. OT has helped me manage my diabetes by losing 55 pounds through exercise. I have discovered my artistic ability through gardening, arts and crafts, cooking, travel, entertaining. I have lots of new friends and without OT, I would be in the hospital. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, all of you, for coming to tell your personal stories. I know that it's not an easy thing to do, but we appreciate it, and it's important to hear.
And also, I have a letter for the governor. If someone could give this to him, can I leave it on the table, please?
We'll have someone deliver it to his office. I can't promise if he'll see it or not.
All right, thank you very much.
We'll have someone take it to
All
his
right.
office.
Yeah, we don't know if he'll see that letter, but that was a letter, obviously asking. What is important here, and the point of her testimony, is her staying in the hospital, which is the way that we would end up dealing with this, with mental illness, with emergency room care. Her staying in the hospital costs the state of Minnesota or hospitals for care, emergency care, which turns into charity care, costs us millions of dollars. But merely spending a little bit of money on occupational therapy, as she put it, or OT, prevents a lot of this. And what we are proposing here in Minnesota's budget is actually cutting the stuff that actually saves us money. And that's not very smart, but we have cut this budget with the big knife, and we are not being very intelligent about it. And these are the kind of things that need to be corrected. Yes, we need to control costs, but I think we need to do it in a way that's going to make sense, as opposed to A, hurt the most vulnerable people we have out there, or B, end up costing us money in the long run. We're gonna take a break here, but when we come back, we'll take your phone calls. And you are listening to Quick on the Uptake. I'm Mike McEntee. We'll be back in just a couple minutes. "35 minutes after 5 o'clock, or 25 before 6, if you like to count it that way. Thanks for joining us. This is Quick on the Uptake. I'm Mike McEntee. We're talking about the governor's budget and the budget cuts that are being foisted upon Minnesota. And we've been asking for your thoughts on that. We heard from several people who yesterday testified at a hearing, a Health and Human Services hearing, about how the governor's budget cuts are going to affect them, and not exactly in the positive manner. We've been asking for your comments, and we have Stan on the line. Stan, what are your thoughts?
Well, Mark, when the Health and Human Services budget goes up by 20% in 1 year, you have to kind of look at ways that you're going to have to control that spending. Mm-hmm. And we are getting money from the bailout for that, S-CHIP and a few others, that we are actually going to be picking up more clients than losing them, it sounds like. And when we had surpluses last time around, we spent them, and we grew government, and we continue to grow government. And until you get a handle on the spending side of government, you cannot keep raising taxes to compensate for that. Right now, you're looking at deficits as far as the eye can see, because as long as you try to keep raising taxes, there's going to be less money in people's pockets to spend money to actually go out and rejuvenate the economy. So you're kind of caught in a catch-22 right now.
Well, Stan, let's start with one thing here. We heard from some people who obviously are not able to fend for themselves, are some of our society's most vulnerable folks. And for some reason, the way this budget has been constructed, they are going to end up on the short end of the stick. They're going to end up without the care that they need, and ultimately, it costs us more money. And I think that the question is not here so much, should we be cutting the budget here? I mean, obviously, we need to control the cost, but the question is how we're doing it. And we're cutting stuff that's actually going to cost us more money in the long run. That's going to come back to bite us because of these hospital stays that then get passed on to the consumer, because the hospitals have to charge more for medical care because they're seeing more charity care and they got to cover their costs.
Not only that, they're seeing more charity care, but they're also seeing a lot of people that have money that don't pay, and the hospitals aren't allowed to go after them in a collections way.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that, but
they're not allowed to harass them. They're not allowed to try to collect that money. Hospitals are stuck also.
Yeah.
Most hospitals barely make a profit, if at all.
Right. What the question is, why is the governor approaching it this way? Why are we taking on society's most vulnerable as the way to cut the budget?
I don't think he is, but if you listen to what Barack Obama...
Well, no, he is. Stan, hang on, because I got to correct you when you're wrong. I've got to correct you when you're wrong. I've got to correct you when you're wrong. Stan, I've got to correct you when you are wrong. And when I just said that society's most vulnerable are going to be hurt by the governor's budget here, there is no question. We heard 2 days of testimony from people citing verse and pages from the governor's budget exactly. Senator Linda Berglund wouldn't let them speak unless they could point out exactly where in the budget they were talking about. That is a fact, so don't dispute me on that. Now, go ahead. Stan, are you there? Okay, we may have lost Stan. I am sorry. I just can't let people go and say something that I can't let you say something that is absolutely 100% wrong. And the regular media will let you get away with that. The regular media will say, hey, we're going to listen to A, we're going to listen to B, and you decide. I am sorry. If I know something is a fact, and I have it sitting in front of me in black and white, and I witness it with my own eyes, I am not going to let you get away with saying something is black when it's white. Sorry about that, folks. Okay, let's move on to a different topic here, because I asked David Brower from MinPost to join me today, and I got to calm down here just a minute. This is something else I'm angry about, and I'm going to ask David some questions about it. But here's the background: Nick Coleman, who is a columnist who has been with the Star Tribune since I was in college, which makes it's a ways back. Nick Coleman writes some of the most biting columns that I've ever read, and some of the most interesting stories I've ever read that don't make the paper normally. And they're done in a narrative, in a columnist style. He has a point of view. He has a point of view, and he's bitten the butt of many of the Star Tribune's big supporters, the Pohlads, some of the large advertisers, and for some reason now, the Star Tribune has decided that Nick Coleman, the guy they nominated for a Pulitzer Prize 2 years ago, is not going to be on the paper anymore. He's not going to be writing a column. He's going to go back to covering, variety stuff, which is, features. And I called the Star Tribune today. I said, why is that? I mean, why haven't I even read in this newspaper that Nick Coleman is no longer doing a column? All I read was something saying, we have some new columnists. Isn't that great? And I got an answer at Nancy Barnes, who's the executive editor. That's the word, executive editor at the paper. Spoke to her secretary, Sandy. Said, "Well, we want new voices." And I said, "That's." I've been in the news business for a long time. I can recognize corporate BS when it's handed out. I want the real answer. I've asked Nancy Barnes to come on to the program today. I haven't heard back. She's been in meetings today, so if she calls in later or tomorrow, we'll talk to her. But I wanted to get some perspective on this story, and that's why I asked David Brower to join us. David, are you there?
I'm here, Mike. How are you?
I am fine. As you can tell, I'm a little riled here.
Yeah, shouting down callers. Boy, that takes me back to some of my radio days.
Oh, okay. I don't do that very often, but I have to when somebody is going to try to put stuff on the air that is absolutely 100% wrong. But I wanted to talk about this, which is the Star Tribune. You've been witnessing. You cover media for MinPost. You've been witnessing kind of the unraveling of what's going on over there. What's your? I mean, I must have had my head in the sand because I didn't recognize that Nick Coleman was gone until last night. And somebody told me. I said, well, "What the heck is that about?" Have you heard explanation on why Nick Coleman is no longer the columnist over there?
I have heard many explanations, in fact. I cannot speak for Nancy Barnes because I have not spoken to Nancy Barnes. Nancy Barnes does not speak to me, which is unfortunate. But I can tell you what I've heard, and your listeners will have to sort of piece together what they think is true because that's what I have to do.
Okay. Well, what have you heard?
Well, okay, so there's the explanation that you sort of got from the secretary today, which is, you know what, these columnist jobs aren't a lifetime tenure. We want to have new voices. Everything's changing in the newspaper business. We have a bunch of talented writers here. We think the ones that we found, John Tevlin and Gail Rosenblum, deserve a shot, and so off we go. The other explanation that I think you'll hear officially is that whether this was Catherine Kirsten's fault or former editor Anders Gyllenhaal's fault or whatever, they got sucked into this sort of, spy versus spy thing where a lot of the columns were these partisan political rants, and those sorts of things in the eyes of management belong on the opinion page by opinion columnists, op-ed columnists who appear across from the editorials, not news columnists who appear in the Metro section. Now, having said that, if Nick Coleman is listening, the veins will be popping out of his head because he maintains, and I agree with Nick, that, on some level he died for Catherine Kirsten's sins. And while Nick and Catherine disagree on probably most issues, Nick is a professional journalist. He is somebody who has bitten the DFL as hard as he has bitten the Republicans. It just so happens that we've had Republicans in the governor's chair for quite a while, but anybody who goes back with Nick to the Perpich administration will remember that Rudy was a favorite target and a target Nick slayed with relish. And so what he would say is, hey, sure, I had my opinions. That's what columnists are supposed to have. They're supposed to have strong opinions. I didn't like this governor's philosophy. I didn't like the DFLers' timidity, but I was an independent guy. I wasn't a former employee of a conservative think tank. And if you made a mistake by hiring Catherine Kirsten, don't
take it out on him
to try to cover your butt when you get rid of her. So that's another explanation.
Okay, but that's what's very weird to me is, and this happened, I think, with WCCO too, when Paul Douglas left. Nick Coleman hasn't written a goodbye column. Nick Coleman, there's been no official explanation in the printed paper. Is this standard operating procedure now in the media? Hey, you're out, and don't even bother saying goodbye or let the door hit you on the way out?
It's tricky. I would say, first of all, that your instinct is absolutely right, that Nick should have been allowed, if he wanted to, and by the way, I'm not 100% sure of that, but my guess would be that he was, to have written a goodbye column. And if I'm going to speculate, and I'm way out on Speculation Island, I would say that Nick might have written a goodbye column that they wouldn't have wanted to run. The only mitigating factor I'll throw out here, in the interest of fairness, I guess, is that Nick has not left the paper.
No, he has not.
Nick is still an employee of the paper. He did not take the buyout, unlike Catherine Kirsten. And he has been reassigned, I'm told, to the variety section. So he has not, even though he has left his column, and that would, I think, be grounds to say goodbye to my column, he has not left the paper. So perhaps that's why they did not let him write the goodbye piece.
It just smacks to me of this is a way of forcing somebody out, of saying, okay, we're going to take away what you do so well, what we have recognized in the past that you do better probably than anybody else in the country, and for whatever reason, we're going to reassign you over here to, kitchen patrol, essentially.
Right. There's no doubt about that. The Star Tribune is a union paper. If they weren't, they probably would have found a way to fire Nick, but they can't. He was offered the buyout, but on the way the Strib's contract works, they give you 2 weeks' pay for every year that you are employed, but it's only for continuous service. And if you remember, Nick left the Strib, right, where he started to go to work for the Pioneer Press, and then came back, and he would have gotten only a couple of months' worth of severance instead of the 40 weeks that people who are as senior as he is really would have qualified for. So it wasn't much of an offer for a guy who's sweated blood and guts for the paper, who didn't want to leave, but maybe would as a result of this sort of a thing. So, Nick, being the stubborn Irishman that he is, and he's a man with a young family, basically has decided to, for now anyway, to stay.
David, I want you to stick with me if you can through this next break, and I want our callers to weigh in here too. If you have a thought, 952-946-6205 is the call-in number. Again, that's 952-946-6205. We're talking about Nick Coleman, the columnist who is no longer a columnist at the Star Tribune. We'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to Quick on the Uptake. Hey, folks, I am going to give out a phone number of the Star Tribune, so if you have your pens ready, get ready to take it down. I think a few calls are due for the executive editor over there.
352-0944. That's 1-800-352-0.
Just a few minutes here before 6 o'clock. The Mark Haney Show is coming up here soon after the news. We're talking about columnist Nick Coleman, kind of a mainstay here in the Twin Cities media, who has disappeared off the column page of the Star Tribune. And in case you are upset with this, I have got a number here for you. The number is 612-673-4000. Again, that's 612-673-4000. That is the Star Tribune main number for their voicemail. You'll get into this voicemail system, ask for editor, and then executive editor, and you'll end up at Nancy Barnes' office. If you are upset with Nick Coleman being gone from the paper, he's still working for the paper, but not having a column, let him know about it, Let him know about it. Anyway, we're talking with David Brower about this. David, what has happened to my paper? I bought, this paper I subscribed to many years ago had, it had great local reporting. It had lots of local news. It had some of the best writers in the country. And now I have lots of variety. I have lots, and variety I mean the fluff. I don't have those biting stories anymore. And now I don't even have a columnist that, used to take on the establishment. What's going on over there?
Well, boy, there's a bunch of things wrapped up in that question. The first thing I want to say, and I know it's going to sound like I'm sort of covering some people's butts, is that there still are a lot of great journalists over there.
There are.
And I feel bad sometimes because we all talk about what we've had and what we've lost, and there's no doubt we have had and lost. But, every day I do a feature for MinnPost called The Daily Glean, and depending on the day, it takes me 2.5 to 3 hours to read everything and sort of write a quick synopsis of what I see as the most important and occasionally the most interesting stories of the day, and I wish I had more time. Now, that's for all Twin Cities media, but the Strib is the biggest player there, and the Pioneer Press is number 2. So I don't want to slight a whole host of writers of Nick Coleman's quality, reporters who are excellent.
And I broke one of my rules there, which was don't paint with a broad brush.
Well, I mean, I think that there's probably a case that can be made, but it's not a simple case that says that the Star Tribune stories aren't as hard-hitting as they used to be. What management over there will tell you is that they're trying to put more of an emphasis now on what they call enterprise journalism, which isn't necessarily an investigation.
No.
But it's the sort of story that they get and nobody else gets. I think even though you're getting fewer pages of the paper, I think what you get in those papers that have local bylines is generally every bit as good. You just don't get as much. Now, having made nice there, I also want to say that one of the reasons that you feel like your paper has disappeared is because the Star Tribune made its bones as a newspaper in this country, especially in the last 50 years, by having a very globally focused, socially liberal, politically liberal, but I would say in a very mainstream, centrist kind of way. I mean, they flogged the stadium, and that wasn't just under the current ownership, but a very progressive worldview. There are traces of that, but really they have been trying under publisher Chris Hart to really rub a lot of that out. This was part of the move that was made actually even before Chris Hart with the hiring of Catherine Kirsten, and later on the denuding of the editorial page. Now, I happen to think there's a lot of good reporters on the editorial page. They do their homework, they're diligent, they work hard, but there is this general thesis that they are not going to be ideologically pegged, and I frankly think that as they may have with their columnists here, certainly with the loss of both Nick and Catherine, they want fewer sharp elbows. They want to be seen either as more responsible or, in some cases, more safe, and that has been a loss of the paper. You know, one of the things I'm watching with both the new columnists, who I'm trying to give a fair shake to, John Tevlin, who's a friend of mine, and Gail Rosenblum, who I don't know but I think is a fine writer, is why are you a columnist? What makes you different than, say, a feature writer?
Right.
And that's, I'm going to wait until I'm going to wait, relatively speaking, I'm going to wait a couple of weeks before I really weigh in on this question, because I want to give them a few columns. I know how hard it is, and even then it will just be a sort of a snap judgment. You know, I want to see the sort of things. Nancy Barnes wrote an editor's note in introducing John and Gail, where she said she didn't want to see people who see things in black and white, and I understand that, but to me, the danger there is what you really mean is you don't want people to see things as right and wrong.
Right.
And if you stop saying what's right and what's wrong and give all sides, maybe as I've done in this interview, to the point of fault, you've lost something pretty essential for a columnist, and why a columnist is a special writer at the paper. I have no problem with an editor saying to a columnist, get out of here and write. You got to be a reporter rather than somebody who just sits on your butt and pontificates. But when I hear this thing about, you know, black and white, what I'm worried that I hear is right and wrong.
We've got a couple callers on the line. I want to get to their questions. We only got a couple minutes left. Pat on line 2, what are your thoughts on this whole situation?
You know, I think this is more about a newspaper trying to take advantage of the bankruptcy law and crushing their employees. They're doing it everywhere, and I think this is kind of an example of this. Plus, we started a Facebook page called Where's Nick, and I encourage anybody who wants to do something.
There we go.
Start signing up. So far, it's just my friends, but hopefully we'll get some more people on there. If anybody can join, it's called Where's Nick, and hopefully we can start organizing against the evil pirates that control the Star Tribune.
I'm going to go there right now.
I'm looking for it right now. Where's Nick? Okay, thank you, Pat. I'm gonna look that one up. Andrina, from Woodbury.
I just wanted to say, in addition to the phone calls and the letters to the editor and the Facebook page, you may also consider canceling your newspaper subscription. That will certainly come to their attention. I know I did it about a year ago with the Pioneer Press because I used to get both papers, and it just got to the point where I just couldn't deal with the Pioneer Press anymore. And they actually called me back and asked why did I cancel, and I pretty much told them why, and you know, they begged for me to come back, and I said no.
Well, Andrina, thank you very much. We unfortunately have run out of time here. David, thank you. If you're upset, call the Star Tribune. Let them know that you want to have Nick Coleman. Thank you for listening to Quick on the Uptake. We'll be back tomorrow. And, Mom, thanks for listening. We'll be Mark Haney's up next. See you soon.